I guess there are two trains running in a way. The story that you want to tell, then how you want to tell it. Sometimes my father would say, we'd talk about a film and then with his brothers or aunts and uncles, and somebody would say, well, they can't do that in a movie. Oh, they can't. No, they can't show that or they can't do that. But I was, as a child, I was wondering why not? Why can't we tell the stories they're not supposed to tell? I was really attracted to Killers of the Flower Moon, initially by the combination of the words flower moon and killers. Impression I got from the juxtaposition of those words. I was drawn to the story and the landscape, but primarily the story because of the nature of the scam. I was interested in that manipulation of the people, particularly the intimacy of it. Ordinarily, we would think, oh, villains hate their victims, etc. No, these villains, quote unquote, actually had a lot of good feelings towards them. They lived with them, they loved them, but they killed them. And that's interesting. That also reflects who we are as a Western culture itself, European culture. What are the values that we brought to this new land? And this story seems to hit right at the heart of that.
Money flows freely here now.
I do love that money, sir.
I've tried to make lists over the years of films that I personally feel were my favorites, whatever that means. Then you find out that the word favorite has different levels. Films that impressed you the most, as opposed to those you just like to keep watching, as opposed to those that you keep watching and learning from or experiencing anew. So they're varied. And I'm always sort of against 10 best lists, you know? They're saying, well, yes, there's Citizen Kane. That changed my life, there's no doubt. Kane broke all the rules, and one of the key things, well said, one of the great things you could bring to filmmaking is ignorance. When they say you can't do this, why not? If you don't get it exactly, you find some way of doing whatever it is you think you could do. I think if you're gonna look at Wells, I think you should go to Chimes of Midnight. There are many different levels to the film. Out of this, quote, Shakespearean play, unquote, comes this extraordinary filmmaking. As far as action scenes are concerned, the best battle scene ever put on film is in Chimes of Midnight. I know the guys who did Braveheart studied it. I know we studied it a lot. It's different from Eisenstein. It's different from Alexander Nevsky. It's different from Potemkin, of course. Never quite anything like it. But I would go there, and I go to Wells's The Trial, which now is restored. It's a very disturbing film. The thing about it is the sense of paranoia, the low ceilings, claustrophobia, that 18 millimeter lens, the location of the train station in Paris that they were about to tear down, with all the desks and the people that shows up in the apartment. Billy Wilder was also in The Crowd, King Vidor, with all the desks. And of course, the scene with the painter, with the slats up in the garret, with the children's eyes looking through. The children's eyes looking through are one of the first shots of Killers of the Flower Moon, looking through the hut as they raise the pipe. That's The Trial. Got the idea, the eye looking. It's the opening of Kundun also, with the little boy opening his eyes and seeing the room vertical. As he gets up, it changes. You know, there are things like that when you talk about films that influence. There are memories that stay in your head. Of course, I'm partial to Kubrick a lot. I love his films. Kubrick, I would go immediately to 2001. I saw it on its first release several times, and it's a transcendent film. There's no doubt about that. And what was extraordinary about the picture was the underplaying.
What are you talking about, Hal?
And the rhythm. Because you have to understand, 1968, I think it was, you're doing jump cuts, which was all a psychedelic. All of a sudden, these curtains open and this giant cinema screen, and everything is moving very slowly. Everything screeches to a halt, and it focuses you. And apparently the critics didn't go for that immediately, but the audiences did. They went with it. If you've seen 2001 so many times, watch Barry Lyndon. It's elegant, the framing, and the use of the zoom lens, interestingly enough, which I don't normally like, but the zoom lens flattens the images to a certain extent, and as he zooms out from a detail, it becomes an 18th century painting. But what's even more interesting to me is, again, the rhythm and pacing of the 18th century.
It is a magnificent entertainment, sumptuous, lush, gorgeous, and haunting, a classic of inestimable value.
Rossellini was very important to me because I saw Paisa on television with my family. I was 5 years old. It was on TV on a Friday night in New York. My grandparents were there crying, and I realized that, I just tell the story, I realized that that was a movie, but a different kind of movie than what I was seeing in the theater. And they were speaking the same language that my grandparents speak, which I don't really understand. And something very powerful is happening in the room. And the suffering that was being shown on screen was very real. It looked like it could happen to any of us because they were us and we were them on screen. If you're not interested that much in the war trilogy of Rossellini, I would suggest the beauty and the joy of watching The Little Flowers of St. Francis. It's humble, sweet, funny, disturbing in a good way, because Francis as a person, what he believes and how he deals with nature, his goodness as a character in the story is a challenge to us. If he's capable of it, we're capable of it. Renoir's The River.
Renoir's masterpiece, The River.
The first Technicolor film shot in India. It introduced me to another culture. The whole idea of the film, the very opening where they do a sand painting on the ground, and the woman's voice, I think it's Woman maybe, says, this is a painting to welcome you to the film. It's like welcoming me to our house. And it's a very moving picture. I just lived with that one. Ugetsu. If you're interested in classic Japanese cinema and Japanese culture of a certain period, this is the most poetic, I think. If you want something really modern from Japan, just take a look at High and Low, Kurosawa. Widescreen, black and white. And it took me a little while to figure it out, but every movement of the characters, Mifune and all the people around him, were all designed. Everything was blocked in very precise form, so you get a very modern impression as you're watching the picture in that widescreen, black and white. And it's a very unique film. It feels modern, but there's a last section of it when it goes into the low part of the city with the drug addicts and this sort of thing. You really feel you're going into a kind of Bosch painting in a way. It almost becomes like science fiction. And it's a very beautiful film. There's the Red Shoes, Paul Pressburger films, and of course Visconti's film, The Leopard, which is a great favorite of mine. If you look at it and allow yourself to be taken into the classical painterly images, you really feel you're in Sicily. You really feel you're part of that culture. My heritage is Sicilian. In fact, the film has a village called Donna Fugata in it. And that actually is Cimina, where my grandmother was born. It's when they get out of the coach and they're covered with dust. The sense of time passing, like in Barry Lyndon, whole lives go by, whole cultures go by. In this case, class. Class has to leave for another class to become them. He says everything has to change in order to remain the same. I saw this Polish film by Andrzej Wajda called Ashes and Diamonds. There's this wonderful actor, Jabolski, who wears these special sunglasses because he plays a character who fought in the sewers of the Warsaw Ghetto for so long that he can't stand the light. And he's a warrior, a fighter. It takes place at the end of the war. It's a story in the last 24 hours of his life, really. He is caught in this web, which ultimately undoes him. But at the same time, for the first time in his life, he meets this young woman there. He realized there could be more to life than killing. And it has one of the most powerful endings and visual surprises throughout the entire film. I showed it to Leo DiCaprio for Billy in The Departed. I said he finds himself in a war, just the way Billy is in a war. And they're not going to get out of it. But at the same time, they also realize there's a life out there, but they aren't meant to live it. And it's such a beautiful film. And all of Vajda's films really. I didn't do Diary of a Country Priest. I can't.